Hands up, except my employees. Nobody does. All right, I'm going to tell you a little story about how the internet came to be in Egypt. How many of you know how the internet came to be in Egypt? You do. All right. Since I'm the last keynote, I'm not going to sit here and lecture you on what we should do in the region and all that fun kind of stuff. I'm going to tell you a little story about how I came to be in Egypt and how the internet came to be in Egypt. I came here in 1998 from the United States. I was born and raised there. My parents are from this part of the world. Both of them went to school here in Egypt, in Cairo. And when I sold my last company, Magna Interactive, to what was then Anderson Consulting at Accenture, my dad told me it's time for you to pay back. I had a big payoff with that sale. And he said, you need to come back to your part of the world and do what you know how to do best. And at the time, I was involved in the internet, in the early beginnings of the internet in the United States. And he told me, there's a need for this in this region, and you need to come to Egypt and help them build this infrastructure. So I did. I came here in 1998. There was all of 2 megabytes coming into all of Egypt. And there was no infrastructure. At the time, there was no Telecom Egypt either. There was something called Arento, the Arab Republic of Egypt National Telecom Organization. It belonged to the Ministry of Transportation. We didn't even have an MCIT. We had no regulator. It was all new. I had the privilege of working with a nice team at Arento. To my surprise, when I came here to Egypt, because I thought at the time, and this was 16 years ago, that this was more of a male-dominated society. Most of the people I dealt with at Arento were women. The chairperson at the time was a wonderful lady by the name of Azza Turk. I'm sure some of you have heard of her or know her. And she had several extremely intelligent cohort engineers working with her at Arento. So I brought a team along with me. About 30 of us came from the United States. And we started looking at the infrastructure in Egypt. And we started trying to figure out how we would build a data network on top of what eventually became Telecom Egypt's own network. Now, this took some time to do. But while I was at it, I went around the country to see the various central offices of what today is Telecom Egypt. I looked at the infrastructure they had. We were in bad shape. There was no power conditioning. There were no separate trays for power and data cables. They were all mixed together. Some of them still are. There were no generators. There were no UPSs. So we had our work cut out for us. Now, part of the research that I personally did was to go around the country and see how much the young people in Egypt knew about the internet. And I met this little boy in Cairo. He saw some commotion going on because I had quite a large entourage with me at the time, and quite a few handlers from the government. And I asked this little boy, do you know what the internet is? And he looked at me, and he said, yes. I said, well, tell me, what is the internet? He said, that's where all the information in the world lives. And I was stunned. I was like, wow. I said, have you seen the internet? He said, no, I haven't. Have you? I chuckled. I told him, yes, of course I have. He said, are you going to show it to me? I said, I hope to one day to show it to you. This was 16 years ago. This boy was 12. He would be around 27 now. Now, we went on our quest to build our data network. and there were several challenges. At the time we were working with access servers, the technology was dial-up. The predominant technology was dial-up. And we wanted to deliver our service throughout all of Egypt. So we sat down with the folks at Arento, and we figured out how to build a data network on top of their network. And then I had a problem to solve. The problem I had to solve was, how do I get people to pay for the service? That was going to be a huge hassle for me, especially since the mandate was that we needed to provide the service to everybody in Egypt, everybody and anybody who wanted it. So, while I was sitting down with the folks at Arento, the wonderful ladies that I was working with, I asked them, is there any way you could bill for the service and collect the money for us? And they looked at me and they said, well, we already send everybody a bill. We tariff our local calls here in Egypt. And a light bulb kind of went off. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Back home in the United States, we only tariff long distance calls. We don't tariff local calls. So I had an idea. I went back to my guys and I said, okay, let's do some math over here. We did the math, and I went back to the folks, and I said, here's the deal. Since I'm going to be offloading all of the data traffic off of your network onto ours, would you share that local tariff, a part of it, a large part of it? And in return, we would provide the internet in essence for free. We would take 70% of the proceeds of the local tariff. We would move the traffic onto our network, and the internet would, in essence, be available to anyone who could dial a phone and add a modem and a PC. And we created what was known as the free internet. How many people over here remember the free internet? All right, good show of hands. The free internet was something that I created about 14, 15 years ago. That's how the free internet was born. Now, we also did another set of math. We looked at the numbers and we said, okay, after 150 minutes, we can convert that dial-up user to a broadband user. And again, the folks at what was then Arento looked at me and they said, no, we can't do that, sir. I said, why not? I said, well, we don't have enough copper to throw 2 copper lines to every home. And I kind of looked very perplexed at them. I'm like, why do we need 2 copper lines? I said, well, how are you going to provide the data stream? I said, easy, we're going to unbundle the voice from the data. We're going to give you back the voice, and we're going to take the data stream. They all looked at me like I came from outer space. They didn't believe it. So once again, I brought my team of engineers, and we did a little test bed. And we showed them in 3 COs how to unbundle the voice from the data. And we created the ADSL market in Egypt. A lot of you are looking perplexed, none of you know this. But that's how the internet came to be in Egypt. Now, and I'll tell you why we got out of it and none of you know us in a second. I had another challenge to come up with. I had the entire cabinet of ministers and the prime minister who wanted to have a presentation of what we were doing after we did all of this research, after we sorted all the technical issues out. And remember, still no MCIT, still no TE. This was late 1998. No, sorry. Yeah, late 1998. They told me, sir, you have to come up with a name for this thing now. A lot of people ask me how we came up with the name NOOR. So I had basically a little less than 24 hours to come up with a brand. At the time I was staying at the Semiramis Intercontinental with my team. There was a full harvest moon out, and I love the Nile. That's one of the things that keeps me here in Egypt. I love Egypt's people, and I love Egypt, period. And I had to come up with a name that encompassed what we did. We enlightened people. We showed people things that they never had access to. We educated people. We informed people. We empowered people. And I had to come up with a name that was easy to say, that was on the top of everyone's mind, that everyone would recognize, that was the same all over the Arab world, because our plan was to have this network going pan-Arab. And I'm sure some of you heard Fadi Ghandour's talk yesterday. When they're used in Egyptian context. I learned that the hard way. So I also had that challenge to deal with. And so I'm racking my mind, I'm sitting on the balcony. There was a harvest moon. It was the end of the year. And all of a sudden, it dawned on me. Every day, people greet me, Sabah al-Noor. Every day, people tell me, Alik Noor, when I come up with a nice idea. Every day, people tell me, Al-Alma Noor. And it dawned on me, wow, here's this word that means light. We transmit our data over light. It's a word that encompasses what we do. It means enlightenment. Everybody knows that word, and everybody says that word. It's easy, and it's on the tip of everybody's tongue. And it means the same thing everywhere, all over the Arab world. So, the word NOOR was born. Now I had to come up with a logo real quick, and I had to do this myself. While looking at the moon rippling off the Nile, I thought to myself, wow, that's really cool. And then it dawned on me in Arabic, the letter N, Noon, has a little dot on top of it. And it kind of looks like the moon rippling off the Nile. A lot of people think that logo is because of Wi-Fi. We built our network long before Wi-Fi existed. That's the moon rippling off the Nile. And there NOOR was born. Now, I had a meeting with the Prime Minister, with a full cabinet, with all the senior people at Arento. And we had to convince them that, okay, first of all, we need to deal with this government agency. It needs to have some kind of corporate form in order for us to have contracts between us and it. We need a ministry separate from the transportation ministry to deal with our issues. And we need a regulator that was not inside the same agency that it was supposed to regulate. So they agreed at that meeting to create MCIT. They agreed to take the TRA outside of Arento, and TE was born. A new minister, Ahmed Nazif, Dr. Ahmed Nazif, became the first Minister of Communications and Information Technology. In fact, I had the privilege of working both with him and with another fellow who became minister, Tariq Kamil, when they were both still employees at Ritzik. The 2 megs that I told you about earlier came through Ritzik, a government agency, and they were distributed to over, I think, ISDN lines or something like that. Ancient technologies. Anyhow, the rest was history. Now, once we helped create all of this, a lot of people زي بياعين البطيخ اللي كل واحد عايز يبيع بطيخ عندكم في البلد. Everybody wanted a license. They promised us there would only be 3. There were 11. They promised us Telecom Egypt would only be in wholesale. And Dr. Nazif actually asked me, what would you call this data wholesale company that we have within what now is Telecom Egypt? We've named it Telecom Egypt. I told Dr. Nazif, that's easy, TE Data. I named it. And then one of the young men at TE Data managed, behind my back, to convince Dr. Nazif that they should be in the retail business and compete with the same people that they were also wholesaling to. That was obviously a very poor move. Egypt today has 100 million people in it. In 14 years, there are only about 2 million active ADSL lines. That's pretty pathetic. The service is poor with most of the providers. Customer service is non-existent. Technical support is even worse. I know a lot of you guys are pissed off with the service that you have and the money you pay for it. At the time I said, okay, look, I'm going to leave those 2 businesses that I created for you, the dial-up and the broadband. And I'm going to focus NOOR's energy on enterprise. The reason I did that was because I knew that there was no way anyone could compete with us on high availability, high quality, customer service, and customer support. And I was right. We own that market today. Now, several years later, we had a revolution here. During that revolution, I don't know how many of you know this. I don't know how many of you watch TV. I certainly don't. I read a lot. But I was told there was a program on HBO that made its way over here on OSN called The Newsroom that actually mentioned us in one of the episodes. I believe in season 1. There was only one network up and running during the blackout in Egypt, and that was NOOR's network. Now, thank you. When I came back, and I had a long conversation, when that order to shut everyone down came, I said, no, I'm not doing this. We carry, you may not know us, but every multinational in this country does. You may not know us, but most of the airports in Egypt do. You may not know us, but all the security agencies in the army does. You may not know us, but most of the airlines that come in and out of this country do. You may not know us, but a lot of the hotels here do. You may not know us, but every bank in Egypt does. You may not know us, but your entire exchange system and all its brokers do. Now it's time for all of you to know us. It's time for Egypt to rise up. It's time for NOOR to rise up. And it's time for all of you to know us. We are in this business now. We are in the consumer business. Our booth is right there. I guarantee you, you will not find a service, a consumer service, with as low a contention ratio as NOOR's. Most of our competitors' contention, now do I need to explain what a contention ratio is? Okay, in the ADSL business, we have something called a DSLAM. This is the machine, the box that we put in the CO that provides you with the service at home. Most of the bandwidth is shared in ADSL. So if I have an uplink with X number of megabytes on it, and I have X number of customers on it, Y number of customers on it, those Y number of customers are all sharing that bandwidth. Now, the way we calculate how much bandwidth to put on there is by estimating how many users are going to be on concurrently. And we create something called a contention ratio. Most of the contention ratios of my competitors around town are 1 to 20, 1 to 30, sometimes even more. The more customers you have on a box, the higher you can afford to make that contention ratio. NOOR's contention ratio averages about 1 to 5. And when customers complain, we try to lower it. I think you deserve to have the kind of service that you pay for. And we want to earn your trust with our service. Now, I want to tell you another thing I found here in Egypt, and this has to do with all of you. You're all involved in startups. Egypt has some of the best engineers I've worked with, and I've worked with some damn good engineers. I would pit any Egyptian engineer against a US engineer any day. I'll give you an example. Once again, during the revolution, when a lot of the cables started getting cut and pulled from the ground because apparently copper is expensive and people like to steal it, we had a problem with some of our enterprise customers. And so we had to provide them with an alternative service. So we used a service called 3G, VPN over 3G now. At the time, most of these devices look like this. This is courtesy of Cisco. They have an antenna on the back. You can groom up to 4 SIM cards on it, and it provides the same type of service that you would be able to provide through a hardwired service to an enterprise. It creates a virtual private network for them mobilely. Now, you've probably all seen those big pizza boxes on top of ATM machines, or bread boxes, or ugly-ass boxes sitting on top of those ATM machines. This is what they're hiding. They're hiding a box like this. I challenged my engineers to come up with something a little more manageable and a lot less costly. This thing costs about $1,200 to buy. It's expensive. Sometimes more depending on how many Wix SIM cards you put in it. My Egyptian engineers came up with this. This is called a cipher. This is 100% designed and assembled in Egypt. Now here's the killer. This costs $120 to make. $1,200, $120. And it's a fraction the size, and guess what? It fits actually inside the ATM machine. Made in Egypt, with a lot more features, with the same number of SIM cards, with the same security and even better. Made in Egypt. When there's a need, you guys rise up to the occasion. So rise up, Egypt. Now, I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of very interesting people here on campus. We're also here on campus. I look forward to meeting a lot more of you. One of my favorite things here, when I come, there are two food vendors over there I love. Being a native New Yorker myself, there's a hot dog stand down there. This guy brought a New York hot dog stand and makes New York style hot dogs with mustard and relish and all the toppings that you want. And that's one of the reasons why you'll find me here a lot. So go and get my hot dog. The other favorite thing I have here is a little shop down there called Gediti. They make amazing smoothie-like juices. My favorite is mango cashew nut, and they have several others. I encourage all of you to go down there and try them out. Now, one of the speakers that was here, who I found out here in Egypt, was literally a stone throws away from my home in Washington, D.C., is Christopher Schroeder. How many people had the honor to meet Christopher Schroeder or been to one of his sessions? He wrote this wonderful book called Startup Rising. You guys are all starting the startup business here. I urge all of you to read. One thing I used to ask during my interview questions when I interviewed somebody was, how many books have you read recently? And I got this blank stare from the person I was interviewing, and he said, "Sir, do you mean in college?" You can learn a lot from books. I read about 3 to 5 a week. I'll tell you a little secret about me. Now, I don't expect everybody to do this. I'm kind of dyslexic, which means I flip words and numbers around. Exactly. I learned how to read 700 pages in law school and business school. I was doing both those degrees together. I also learned that I had not too good an attention, had attention deficit, some sort of attention deficit disorder, which means I couldn't focus on any one thing for a long time. Now, our brains are wired to kind of look at all kinds of things. They're not wired to linearly focus on any one thing anyway. That's not the way God meant our brains to work. So I figured, I taught myself that, okay, I can't read one book end to end by itself. It can't keep my interest. So why don't I read 3 or 4 or 5 together? And I found I could get through 5 books in a week. No problem. Couldn't do 1 in a week by itself. But I urge you all to read this one. And the reason I told you that story is there is nothing you can't overcome if you put your mind to it. And one of the little blips I saw on Facebook said working in teams is better than working as an individual. That's absolutely true. At NOOR, we encourage everyone to work in teams. One processor is a lot stronger than, 2 processors are a lot stronger than 1. 3 or 4 are stronger than 2. Same thing with the brain. Work in teams, help each other out. One thing I found very strange in this country, well, in all of the Middle East, sorry to be honest with you, it's not just here, is people kind of like to keep stuff to themselves, close to the chest. It doesn't work. That's one of the reasons why we aren't as advanced as we should be. And yet, we have a civilization that is the cradle of civilization. Egypt has been around for over 8,000 years and has so many wonders in it. And it's time to bring all those wonders back. I went to the Cairo Museum not too far from here, and I saw a bed with a hinge on it that apparently King Tut took to the desert with him. You were making hinges 4,000 years ago. There's no reason why this DNA right here can't create the same wonders that we once upon a time created thousands of years ago. I say we because my heart is 100% Egyptian after 16 years. I know a lot of people that tell me, why are you here? You can be anywhere in the world. Why do you stay in Egypt? I quite simply love it, and I love its people, and I think those of us who were privileged to have so much have a responsibility to pay back. And I want to pay back. Now, speaking of payback, this book is coming out in Arabic soon. Those of you who don't want to read in English, read it in Arabic. 100% of the proceeds of this book go to an organization that encourages, empowers communities to lead through entrepreneurship. This is for underprivileged children. So read the book, buy it, it's not bad. And it goes to a good cause. Chris is a good man. Now, Chris also told me something the other day while I was just meeting him right here on the steps. He said, you know, we need to take note in the West. These people are going to kick our butt one day. And guess what? You are going to kick the West butt one day. Rise up, Egypt. Rise up. That's the end of my story time. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day over here. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to come and ask me. I'm very friendly, I don't bite, I'm very approachable, and I love to help people out. So come see me. Thank you.